welcome to Franchise Focus. I'm your host, Lisa Linkowski. I am a certified franchise consultant representing hundreds of franchise concepts, and Franchise Focus is all about shining a spotlight on experts in the franchise industry as well as people that own franchise businesses. And today in studio, I have Evan Goldman, who is a partner with Greenspoon Marder, an attorney at law in New Jersey. And welcome, Evan.
Thank you, Lisa. Thank you for having me.
Thank you so much for joining us. It's been quite a bit to get you here, so I'm glad that we finally were able to squeak it in before the end of the year here.
I appreciate your patience.
Thank you. Of course, I'm delighted. So, Evan, you're an attorney. You're dealing in franchise law, and wanted to get some of your backstory. Why franchising? How did you come into this space?
So I fell into franchising. I was working for a large financial company doing legal work and hated it. It was super boring, and went on either CareerBuilder or Monster.com and put my resume up there, and they said, hey, here's a law firm in your area that might be interesting to you. I applied. I went in for my interview, and they said, we do franchise law. And I said, I don't know what the hell that is, but I'll do it. And that was, over a decade ago, and that's where I am now. So went from that firm and have moved around, joined my current firm about 10 months ago as a partner in the New York and New Jersey offices, and started the franchise group with a buddy of mine who's based in Boca Raton.
Okay, so they didn't have franchising before you joined the law firm?
Correct, yeah. So Adam Wash and I, who we started out as adversaries about 6 years ago. We were on opposite sides of a litigation. And we settled the case with another franchise lawyer in Philadelphia, and we said, man, you're a nice guy. And he said, hey, you're a nice guy. And we said, let's keep in touch. And so we did, and we're always looking for the right opportunity to work together. And he said, hey, I'm joining this firm, Greenspoon Marder. And I said, all right, I'm in. I'll do it with you. So he started out of the Boca office. I started out of the New Jersey office, and here we are.
And here you are on the same side of the equation, so to speak.
Yep, yeah.
All right, terrific. And not boring franchise law, right?
It is certainly not boring. Different thing every day. The laws always stay the same, but the disputes always just a little bit different. And I love working with different brands. So we represent, so between Adam and I, probably over 200 franchisors, give or take, throughout the country, in everything from lice removal to restaurants to kids' cooking schools to anything you can imagine.
Wow, that's quite the variation from lice removal to kids' cooking schools. But I kind of see a correlation too at the same time, but we're not going to go there.
Yeah, they're good marketers for each other.
Yeah, so 200-ish franchisors. Are you on the franchisee side as well?
So we do. We represent every year about 30 to 40 people buying franchises, some with and some without consultants. And we also represent maybe a half dozen to a dozen in litigation on an annual basis on the franchisee side.
Okay. And which one do you prefer? I would assume it's the Zor side, since that's the bigger area, or no?
So my favorite part is probably working with people who are buying their first franchise. Mm-hmm. I think people have rose-colored glasses and everything is so positive and enjoyable. That's probably the best part, because they're usually leaving a job that they were no longer needed at or didn't want to be at anymore,
right,
and are now looking to become their own boss, and that's something I really enjoy. But the franchisor side, working with a pizzeria that thinks they can expand, or some other business that wants to expand through franchising, is always great.
Yeah, absolutely. Yeah. So you're doing, that whole side of the emerging business, and then you'll also represent, if someone's well established and they just want to change law firms, mm-hmm, you're going to take that on as well, I would assume.
Yeah, we work mostly with emerging brands, okay, but we represent, one franchisor has about 400 units. One has it's a hotel chain of 5 different brands, flags, but about 300 units, and we do all of their litigation nationwide. So we'll work with most people as long as they're good people.
As long as they're good. That's the caveat,
Yeah.
right? I thought you were going to say that you enjoyed working with the franchisees with the rose-colored glasses so that you could knock the glasses off and make them understand really what they were getting themselves into. No, that's not.
No, that's definitely part of the fun of it, right? So, and I'm sure you deal with it because you deal with,
Yes.
startup franchisees, usually first-timers, I'd
Yes,
imagine.
mostly.
And they say, oh, we're partners with the franchisor, or they told me I don't need to review it with a lawyer because I'm not going to change anything, and I've got to sort of slap them across the face a few times and say, wake up, this you're investing tens or hundreds of thousands of dollars, potentially millions of dollars into building a restaurant, for instance, and you need to protect yourself.
Yeah.
Right.
And that's with regard to the franchise disclosure document and the franchise agreement that, often they get told there's no changes, we're not going to look at anything. And then they go, well, why do I need to spend that money? And I say, it's the best money that you're going to spend so that you can clearly understand what it is that you are getting yourself contractually obligated to
Right.
for 5-10 years. Why would you not want to understand that? And they go, well, I can read through it. And I'm like, no, I don't recommend that.
So I always tell, when I meet someone who's buying a franchise, they say, tell me about yourself. And I said, well, I started out, and I tell them the story about how I got into franchising. But I said, for the first 3 years of my career, I only represented franchisees and only in litigation. So I had, and I probably was the busiest in terms of hours billed in my entire career. So I had enough hours for 3 full years of only representing franchisees where things got really, really bad. And so that's why you need a lawyer. I'm happy that of the hundreds of franchisees I've represented over the years, only one has ever come back to me asking for bankruptcy or litigation advice. Because when you go in with eyes wide open, you can understand they're contractually obligated to do X, but it doesn't mean they're going to do Y. If I fail, here's what's going to happen in terms of liquidated damages or personal guarantees or whatever it may be, non-competes, for instance. So understanding what you're getting yourself into, as you said, is really the most important thing, because then you don't get as much disgruntled responses later on.
Right, exactly.
Yeah.
And when I'm looking at a concept, one of my first questions is, do you have any litigation?
Yep.
That's one of my first questions. And if they have a lawsuit because someone went outside of their, and not an NDA, but they started to try to come up with that exact same concept.
Yep.
And shirk away from the the business that they had bought. Okay, I've got that. But if there's now mutiny within the system, and they've all decided that the royalty, let's say the advertising money wasn't being used the way that had been
Right.
told, or the training wasn't what they had been expressed, or whatever, that is, I'm staying far, far, far away from that, because it's a mess and everyone's embroiled in that, and I don't need to add to that fray, right?
That's exactly right. So, when I represent franchisors and we have a franchisee that's not following the rules, and I say, I think you have to sue them. And they go, well, we don't want to have litigation. I said, but this is litigation you want to disclose, because
Right.
if you let people out of the system with no consequences ever,
That's right.
who's going to pay you $50,000, $100,000 to join into your system where you're not protecting your brand? You have to enforce the rules and protect your brand. That doesn't mean you have to be a bully, and that doesn't mean if someone just isn't working out, you're going to sue them just for money. No, if they're not breaking the rules and trying to get one over on you, then usually I say let it go. But if they're, hey, I'm going to use McDonald's because I don't represent them, a McDonald's franchisee, and now I'm going to start McDougal's or whatever it was in
Right.
Coming to America, I can't think of the name, then, that's something you have to protect yourself against.
Yes, 100%. And it also sends a message to everyone out there that you're not letting chaos reign
Sure.
and rule
Yeah.
the day, because you can't have that either. So it's not really a fine line, but it's a clear distinction of not going crazy because the person wasn't posting properly on their social media,
Right.
to starting up a whole nother competitive business.
Yeah.
Well, you can't just let something like that happen.
You can't, and I look at it because I've represented franchisees and franchisors for so long, from both sides of the table, right? And what I try to do more than anything, even though I'm a litigator by trade, is come to a solution, right? They don't want to be in your system. What can you give them? What can they do?
Right.
And so we used to represent franchisees against one particular system, and they wanted to show that they were enforcing their contracts, and so we would enter into essentially judgments in their favor, but then they would let the guys compete. So everyone kind of won at the end of the day. Yeah, I think it's all about coming to a really good solution for everybody.
Yeah, and people that are in the audience watching this and they're hearing us sitting here and talking about litigation, and they're saying they're just about ready to sign, I'm sure it's making them nervous, but it is, and it happens in all facets of business.
Correct.
Franchising is no exception. And do you have any stats at all about how much litigation is involved in? I'm catching you cold right now.
Yeah,
but
no.
Sometimes people rattle these types of things off.
So I don't have any sort of like IFA statistics or anything like that, which is the International Franchise Association. But I don't have a ton of litigation. So we represent. I'll say my team, my direct team represents about 100 franchisors, and if we're putting maybe 3 or 4 item 3 disclosures, which is litigation a year, that would be a lot.
Okay, so
Right.
very minimal. And that was my next question, is how much of a percentage of your job is devoted to litigation?
Yeah.
And it's pretty minimal?
So on the franchisor side, it's almost zero, which is great, except for some of the brands where we only do their litigation and don't do anything else for them. But for most emerging brands, we don't have a lot of litigation that we're doing. Most of our litigation is on the franchisee side, if at all. And but to counter sort of my limited experience in terms of the number of franchises, there's one brand who every year will sue about 200 former franchisees. Now, usually it's always about money, and it's a hotel brand. So if you're not buying a hotel, you're safe, I promise. So in the hotel business, it's kind of unique. In most franchises, as you know, you sign up to become a burger franchisee for this brand. You can't say, I don't want to be this burger brand, I'm going to go start Johnny's Burgers. You can't do that. In the hotel industry, that doesn't really exist. You could take a Wyndham and turn into a Marriott, and then a Hilton, and then a Days Inn, or whatever you want to do. But you have to pay a fee for that, and usually it's always about paying the fee. And so we handle, and that franchisor happens to be based in New Jersey, so we do about a dozen of those cases a year, defending the franchisees against claims for lots and lots of money.
Wow, because they've gone off and started something else, and they've got to pay some kind of fee back, as per the contract. But it's in the contract, right?
It's in the contract, and they should know what they're getting into.
Yeah, they should know what they're getting into.
And that one I can sort of understand, because it's not like you shut down and you just failed, right? You turned it in from, I'm making it up again, from a Marriott to a Hilton or whatever. The problem I have is franchisees who legitimately are going out of business. They're failing because they're failing. And it happens, right? Poor location, COVID screwed up my business model, something, I started a buffet business in, February of 2020. That's probably not going to...
Personal illness.
Yeah, personal illness, sure, family issues. Those things happen, and liquidated damages are part of many franchise agreements. And what happens is at the end they say, all right, well, if you stopped in year 5 of a 10-year contract, we're going to look to you for the next 2, 3, 4, 5 years of royalties. So we want to check for $100,000 or $200,000. And my position is 2 things. One, we should have negotiated that at the beginning to prevent this exact issue. But 2 is, if I was failing, why would I, again, I'm not starting a competitive business, I'm just going away.
Right.
And so that's really where I take issue with some franchisors who have somewhat of harsh tactics on that.
Yeah, okay. All right, that's a little bit of a grim place for us to stop for the moment, but we're going to come back after the commercial break to talk about some other areas within the attorney world of franchising, and we're going to hear a word quickly from Zoom One Media, so stay tuned.
I'm Bob Hochgertel from Kings Road Brewing Company. I'm here to tell you about a brand new show on RVN Television called Cooking with the King. Each week, we're going to taste and sample some of the best beers the Kings Road Brewing Company has to offer. And we're going to talk to area chefs and restaurant owners as we pair our beer with their signature dishes. We're going to teach you how to cook and eat like a king. Cheers.
A stroke can be easy to detect. A loved one can't speak, perhaps they can't move. But there's another sign of a stroke that many of us can't see. It's called spatial neglect, and it can occur during or after a stroke, causing distorted visual movements. Fortunately, there's a solution by using optical prism technology during rehabilitation. If you or a loved one have experienced a stroke, ask your doctor about spatial neglect. Spatial neglect. See the whole picture at KesslerFoundation.org.
Are you burned out, disenfranchised, disengaged, extremely distracted? Do you feel that you're lost in semantics, over-leveraged, overwhelmed? My name is Lisa Fratelli, and I have a show on RVN TV, always streaming. The name of the show is The Neuroscience of Wealth and Well-Being. The intention of this show is to explain how you can get back to homeostasis, flow states, creativity. It's highly correlated with happiness and well-being. So you can get out of overwhelm, get out of burnout, not feel distracted, and get back to your life. You will hear from experts who will get you back on track so you can enjoy your life again. RVN TV, we're always streaming.
Are you part of the Great Resignation? Are you a business owner that would like to diversify your business holdings? Have you always had an entrepreneurial itch but did not have a concept to get you started? Milestone Franchising represents over 500 franchise concepts across 30 industries. Concepts range from $20,000 to $6 million, and they can be home-based, office-based, mobile, or brick and mortar. We guide you through the process to select which concept is best for you based upon your core competencies, your interests, and your financials. Milestone Franchising is part of the International Franchise Professionals Group, IFPG, and will bring a host of resources to assist you in your quest for business ownership. When you work with a certified franchise consultant, you gain access to a professional process that helps you succeed in your search for the right placement. Finding the best placement for you within the franchising world of 4,000 concepts is the objective. Matching your skills and goals with a culture that fits you best is the priority. For a free consultation, visit our website at milestonefranchising.com. Milestone Franchising is here to lead you in a new direction.
Hi, I'm Bob Hochgertle from Kings Road Brewing Company. I'm here to tell you about a brand new show on RVN television called Cooking with the King. Each week, we're going to taste and sample some of the best beers at Kings Road.
Welcome back to Franchise Focus. I'm your host, Lisa Linkowski, and joining me in studio today is Evan Goldman, who is a partner with Green Spoon, Martyr, with offices in New York and New Jersey, and doing work out of Boca too, right?
Yeah, so we're a national firm, which was one of the appeals to making the move. So it's probably 15 plus offices between here, a bunch in Florida, LA, Texas, basically everywhere we need to be.
Right, because if you represent all these emerging franchisors, you need to be
Yep.
everywhere because you never know where their corporate location is going to be.
Yeah, and it also helps from a litigation perspective because we always have someone locally.
Right.
Because I've litigated, arbitrated, or mediated probably in 35 states so far.
Wow.
So my travel log's pretty good. But having a team of people really does help the client because now we're not having to find local attorneys in every state. We have most states covered.
You have the team in-house.
Yeah.
Oh, that's terrific.
Yeah.
Wow. So that explains why you travel so much. Okay. So we were chatting about the whole process when someone wants to engage you, the franchisee, a prospective franchisee wants to engage you, and they're engaging you to look at the franchise disclosure document and hopefully then the franchise agreement. How do you charge for that? What's your structure for that?
So for the most part, we're flat fee base, so depending on if you're buying a single unit franchise or a multi-unit franchise, there's a variable of a couple $100 between the two, and that's a flat fee to review the FDD, which is a couple 100 pages, the actual franchise agreement, and we usually have a phone call that lasts anywhere from 90 minutes to 3 hours on average. Zoom phone call if you're local, I'll meet in person if you really want to, and that's one flat fee. For the negotiations, to the extent they decide to use me, for that, I do charge hourly at my standard hourly rate with a small discount because I'm so familiar with them at that point.
Okay.
But what I like to tell people is I'm giving you all of the tools in my tool basket. So I actually review the FDD on my iPad. I hand mark every single page. You'll see smiley faces and stars and, you know, like no, 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 or yes, 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 or whatever my thought in, you know, my mind is at that particular moment. And I give that to them. And then during the phone call, they sort of can decipher what these crazy comments and notes are, and then can negotiate on their own behalf if they want, and then come back to me and say, hey, do you mind taking a quick look at the addendum, or saying, you know, just handle the whole thing. We want you to do the whole thing.
Okay, all right.
Yeah.
Here's a question that is one that gets bandied around all over the place, is when is the best time for a prospective candidate to engage you as an attorney to review these documents?
Definitely before you sign, all right? So I get people who will call me up and say, I signed a franchise agreement 3 months ago and I still haven't found a location and I don't know if I want to do it anymore. Can you review the contract? I'm kind of useless at that point, right? Yeah, I could try, but you're not getting your money back. Unless something horrific happened and it's, you know, you just weren't a poor decision maker. What I like to say is when you're down to 1 or 2 brands, that's when when you should call me. So I assume your experience has been people start at sort of a funnel, right? You start with 10 brands and then 5 and then 3 and then 2. So once you get to 2 or 1, that's when you want, just because the economics don't make sense to spend money on 3 reviews.
Right.
When you can just do 1 or 2.
And it just muddies the water. It makes it so much more complicated.
Right.
But yes, I agree. Getting down to that 2, that could really help you to understand which one
Right.
to cut off, because you're looking at the agreement and maybe there's just some things that they're asking for that are just more unreasonable.
Correct.
Or they're just not as friendly to the franchisee as the other. So that could be a way of narrowing things down.
Yeah.
I often also, you've got the discovery day process, and since COVID, it's all been sped up so
Right.
much more because, it's all virtual, most of it.
Sure.
And so it makes this process just so much quicker sometimes. And, it used to be back before COVID, you went to discovery day and there's the franchise agreement and they're hoping that you're going to
Yeah.
be signing at that moment. But now it's kind of a little bit more odd, I would
Sure.
say. So I kind of say, if you're really getting very comfortable that this is something that you're looking to, maybe even start with the FDD before you go to discovery, then go to discovery, then review the franchise agreement, something like that.
Yeah, I get that question a lot. Should I do the review before or after discovery day? And I like, I give them the ups and downs of both. One is, if you do it before discovery day, you'll have a list of questions to ask them and be really well prepared for the conversation. If you do it after discovery day, you may have spent discovery day realizing this isn't the brand for me and saved yourself, the money on the review process. So, my inclination is always do it before, use discovery day as sort of an actual discovery tool.
Right.
Be knowledgeable about what they're expecting from you, and then, decide whether or not this is really for you. I always caution against signing at discovery day, right? Going back to my initial comment about the rose-colored glasses, they're never rosier than at discovery day, right? You see everything in their greatest light, and you're going to be inclined. Now, if you've already done your review and we've done some of the negotiating on your behalf, then sure, then go for it. But if, it's your first time seeing the document or you haven't spoken to a lawyer, that's where, you shouldn't. And just while we're on that topic, one thing I'll certainly say is hire a lawyer, but hire a franchise lawyer. Right? I can't tell you how many people say, and this is never pre-signing, it's always 3 years later when they have a problem and they're negotiating or litigating with the franchisor. It's, I hired my mother's real estate attorney or the malpractice attorney who handled her car accident or, whatever it may be. That's not the right attorney, right? I don't handle, medical malpractice or divorce work or estate planning. I handle franchise work and commercial litigation. Go to someone who does franchise for the vast majority of their income, because they actually know what they're looking for. And from the franchisor's perspective, this may sound weird, but I want my clients' franchisees to go to a really experienced franchise attorney, because I want to make sure that all of those items are discussed, and they're not finding some lawyer who's like, well, the royalty is off gross. Well, of course it is. That's how the franchise industry
That's how it works.
But someone who doesn't understand franchising is going to be so shocked by that concept that they may blow up the deal for your prospective franchisee, for no good reason, quite honestly.
Yeah, excellent. I'm so glad that you raised that, because it is something that I counsel my candidates on all the time. And luckily, I knew nothing about anything. I fell into franchising like you did. Like I just kind of fell into it. And I knew nothing about anything. And I was one of the first franchisees. And I reached out to an attorney that had been doing other work for us. And I said, hey, I'm thinking about purchasing a franchise. Do you work with franchises? And he said, no, but my partner is one of the best around. And luckily, I went with his partner, and it was a great thing.
That's wonderful.
I ended up not making like a big giant mistake, because I didn't know. Like I didn't know people like me existed. I was just doing this on my own, just trying to muddle around and figure it out. But on that piece, that was great. So I was really grateful for that.
And what often happens, at least in my experience, is I'll serve as outside franchise counsel to a bunch of law firms. So I don't work for them, right? They're technically my client, but I'm really providing advice to them for the purpose of them providing advice to their ultimate client, because they don't want to lose the client, but they also realize they have no idea about franchising, right? So we do a decent amount of that kind of work.
Yeah, oh, that's great too. So you've got, listen, you're the person that people need to be speaking to on all counts, right?
And there's not a lot of us. I think
Right.
there's 2,000 or so franchise lawyers that are truly franchise lawyers nationwide. And to put that in perspective, in the state of New Jersey, there's probably about 50,000 lawyers total, right? So figure every state on average has 40,000. You're talking about a couple million lawyers, of which a minuscule percentage are franchise lawyers.
Tiny fraction of it is franchise specific.
And some of them only represent franchisors, some of them only represent franchisees, and we try to find the sort of the Goldilocks in the middle.
The nice balance.
Yeah.
Well, great. Well, listen, you need franchise attorney work. You know who to contact, and we're going to throw Evan's contact information up on the screen here so that you can grab it. And thank you, Evan, so much for coming in. This was a great conversation. And one day I'll have to have you back so we could talk about some actual real stories without giving away any confidential information there.
Sounds good to me.
But this was terrific. Thank you so much for joining Franchise Focus. Franchise Focus airs every Friday at 1 o'clock Eastern Standard Time. And I'm your host, Lisa Linkowski. You can learn all about me at my website at milestonefranchising.com. Thanks so much for watching.